Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Doug had always believed in his ability to hold the pen to his own life story. He told himself that no matter what storms came, he could bend the narrative, polish the angles, and keep control of the plot. To the outside world, he looked like a success story in the clean, glossy way magazines loved to sell, a respected cosmetic surgeon, a neat home in an enviable neighborhood, a marriage to Vanessa that appeared both steady and enviably free of drama. Patients smiled when they left his clinic, neighbors waved from their porches, and no one ever saw the panic that had been gnawing at him for months. Behind the pristine glass walls of his practice, Doug's financial reality was bleeding out. A string of risky investments, some in medical equipment startups, others in real estate partnerships he barely understood, had gone sour one after another. Friends he'd once bragged to about his savvy stopped returning calls when he hinted about short-term loans. The accounts he kept hidden from Vanessa were thinning to the point of transparency. The debts weren't loud yet, but Doug could hear their footsteps. In that hollow space where desperation lived, Joey's name rose like an echo. Joey was trouble incarnate, a man whose wealth moved like smoke appearing solid until you tried to grasp it, then vanishing into shadows. His history was a lattice of questionable deals, casino whispers, and just enough real estate holdings to look legitimate if you didn't stare too long. Doug knew Joey well enough to know that if he could get proof of anything truly damning, blackmail could be the lifeline he needed. But Joey didn't make mistakes that strangers could see. He was meticulous about his image, always 2 steps ahead of suspicion. Doug needed someone with a map to the man's blind spots. Someone who had once been inside the circle. That's when Randy's name surfaced in his mind like a half-forgotten debt. Randy had been Joey's right hand for years, the kind of fixer who could walk into a private poker game and walk out with 3 people owing money they'd never be able to repay. He was the man you sent to smooth things over when a client got cold feet or to remind someone why skipping a payment wasn't wise. But greed had cracked that loyalty. Years ago, Randy skimmed from the casino's till, thinking Joey was too busy to notice. Joey noticed. The fallout was ugly and fast, Randy beaten, cut off, and left to fend for himself with a reputation too tainted for the old crowd and too dangerous for the legitimate world. Doug found him in a bar with dim lighting and no working clock, the kind of place that made you forget how long you'd been sitting. Randy's eyes were sharp, but his posture was the loose sprawl of a man who'd stopped expecting much from life. Doug didn't waste time. "You understand Joey better than anyone," Doug said, leaning in so his voice wouldn't carry. "You know where the bodies are buried, maybe literally. I'm not asking you to take the fall. Just help me find the lever." We split the payout. Randy stared into his glass for a beat too long. His silence was a careful thing, the kind that made people fill it with their own assumptions. Doug read it as hesitation, maybe even consideration. What he didn't see was the speed of Randy's thoughts, already turning toward a different angle entirely. Randy knew Joey could be cruel, but he also knew Joey could be generous to those who proved themselves. Loyalty, even the manufactured kind, had value in Joey's world. And Randy had never stopped missing the way it felt to be on the inside, protected, relevant, feared by association. Doug's plan was tempting, yes, but there was a cleaner route back into Joey's good graces. Warn him about Doug before Doug even made his first move. What Doug also didn't know was that the most dangerous piece on the board was already in motion. Vanessa, his wife, was not just acquainted with Joey. She was tangled up in him in ways Doug couldn't have imagined. It had started at a real estate gala, all champagne flutes and soft jazz. Vanessa, sharp in a sapphire dress that made her the focus of every conversation, had caught Joey's eye. He knew her reputation, charismatic, ambitious, and running her own real estate development firm with an enviable portfolio. She knew his dangerous, magnetic, whispered about. The first conversation had been playful, the second charged. The third led them to a hotel suite neither of them booked under their own names. From Joey's perspective, Vanessa was more than a lover. She was an asset. Her company was the perfect shell for moving dirty money properties bought at inflated prices, then flipped in quick, suspiciously profitable deals. Paper trails that looked legitimate enough to pass a casual audit, but hid the reality. Profits weren't always profits, and cash flow wasn't always clean. At first, Vanessa played along like it was a game. The commissions were huge, the attention intoxicating. But months in, the game shifted. The amounts grew larger. The contracts more opaque. She found herself signing documents without fully understanding every clause, trusting Joey when he told her it was just for optics. And then the first letter from a regulatory agency arrived, politely requesting clarification on a series of transactions. Joey smiled through it. "We've been through worse," he told her, brushing hair from her face with a touch that felt equal parts tender and possessive. She wanted to believe him, but the unease was growing roots. For the first time, she wondered if he would protect her when things turned uglier, if she'd simply be the shield between him and the law. While Vanessa weighed her risks, Randy made his move. He reached out to Joey under the pretense of wanting to bury the hatchet. They met in the back of an exclusive lounge, where the music was low enough that conversations felt like secrets. Over 2 drinks, Randy let slip the key detail: Doug was sniffing around for leverage. Worse, Doug was close to finding something worth selling to the highest bidder. Joey didn't interrupt. He just let the ice clink in his glass, eyes fixed on Randy like he was studying a puzzle. "Interesting," Joey said at last. "And where do you fit in, Randy?" Randy's answer was smooth, practiced. "I'm loyal. Always have been." It wasn't true. But it was exactly what Joey wanted to hear. From there, events accelerated. Joey extended an invitation to Doug for a private meeting to discuss mutual opportunities. Doug took the bait, imagining he was about to negotiate the terms of Joey's downfall. Instead, he walked into a room where Randy sat waiting, arms folded, expression unreadable. Joey didn't waste time. He laid everything out: the affair with Vanessa, the laundering operation, the contracts with her name on them. Each word was a hammer blow, and Doug felt the ground tilt beneath him. "You think you can make me bleed?" Joey's voice was calm, each syllable deliberate. "You've got bigger problems than my bank account. You've got a wife who's about to take the fall for things she doesn't even understand." Doug turned toward Randy, betrayal sharp in his gaze. Randy didn't blink. Then Joey delivered the final cut, wrapped in silk. "I'm giving you one chance. Walk away and forget this ever happened. Or I make sure Vanessa's name is the first one on the indictment." Doug knew it wasn't a choice at all. He left without a word, his scheme dead, his marriage hollow, and his only ally revealed as Joey's man all along. Randy left that meeting with a quiet nod from Joey, a subtle acknowledgement that he'd earned a place, however temporary, back inside the circle. He knew better than to mistake it for permanence. In Joey's world, loyalty was transactional, and debts never truly disappeared. And Vanessa? The audits were still coming. Her name was still on every contract that mattered. Joey might shield her for now, but only while it suited his interests. Deep down, she suspected her real trouble hadn't even started. Under the heavy quiet of that meeting's aftermath, each of them carried away a different kind of calculation. Doug returned to his clinic like a ghost wearing his own skin, still hearing Joey's voice in his head, still tasting the acid of betrayal. He tried to focus on patients, on consultations, on the careful artistry of lifting an eyebrow or reshaping a jawline. But every smile felt like a mask, every handshake like a transaction in which he was being undersold. The knowledge that Vanessa was in deeper than he'd imagined twisted in his chest, part anger, part fear, part helplessness. Vanessa, meanwhile, lived in a strange duality. In daylight, she was the poised businesswoman, discussing market trends and property valuations. At night, she was the woman who couldn't sleep without replaying every signature she'd ever put to paper. The auditor's questions were getting sharper, less polite. One even hinted they'd been tracking certain accounts for months. She tried to keep it from Doug, even now, both to avoid more conflict and because some part of her knew he might weaponize the information. Joey, for his part, treated the entire episode as nothing more than a mildly entertaining diversion. In his world, people tried to play him all the time. Doug's attempt had been clumsy, even amusing in its naivety. But he did not forget. He never forgot. Every move Joey made was an investment, sometimes in money, sometimes in people. He was already thinking about how to turn Vanessa's precarious position into leverage for something larger. Randy slid back into Joey's orbit as though he'd never been gone, though the re-entry was cautious. He wasn't given big jobs yet, just errands, little demonstrations of reliability, but even those carried the old thrill. Still, Randy knew he was under observation. Joey trusted no one without conditions, and this renewed proximity was as much a test as it was a gift. As the weeks passed, the pressure on Vanessa's business tightened. 2 property sales stalled unexpectedly after the buyer's funds were flagged for review. A third collapsed entirely when an investigator subpoenaed transaction records. Joey reassured her with a smile and a drink in hand, but the tension in his eyes told a different story. He was already shifting assets, moving the dirtiest money somewhere Vanessa couldn't touch it. Doug started noticing subtle changes in Vanessa's phone calls she took in other rooms, unexplained meetings that stretched late into the night. In another life, he might have confronted her outright. Now he just watched, storing every detail, unsure whether to use it to save her or to save himself. The first real fracture came when one of Vanessa's junior accountants quietly resigned and sent an anonymous tip to the authorities. The tip mentioned specific addresses, sale dates, and payment irregularities. That alone might have been survivably accepted. It also named Vanessa as the legal representative who had signed off on every transaction. The investigators moved fast. Vanessa was summoned for questioning, told she was not yet a suspect, but warned that her cooperation was strongly advised. Joey assured her it would blow over, that his people were handling it, but the grip he kept on her arm during that reassurance told her he was as nervous as she was. Doug heard about the questioning 2 days later, not from Vanessa but from a patient who moved in the same social circles. That humiliation burned worse than the news itself. It was then that Doug began considering the unthinkable, going back to Joey, not to threaten this time, but to bargain. He had things Joey might still want: his surgical skill, his discretion, his proximity to Vanessa. Perhaps he could trade those for her safety. Randy caught wind of Doug's quiet inquiries and reported them. But this time Joey didn't respond with immediate confrontation. Instead, he watched. He wanted to see how far Doug would go, what price he was willing to pay, and whether that desperation could be shaped into something useful. Vanessa, caught between the slow crush of legal pressure and the unpredictable mercy of Joey, began making her own plans. She started pulling clean funds out of her company, stashing them in accounts Doug didn't know existed. If the worst happened, she'd need a way to disappear. The stage was set for a collision no one could fully control. Doug inching closer to Joey with a desperate bargain, Randy trying to solidify his regained status, Vanessa moving pieces in secret, and Joey orchestrating it all with the patience of a man who knew every outcome still ended with him on top unless someone, somewhere, decided to break the script. The rain had been falling for hours, a steady, relentless drumming on the city's slate rooftops, as if the sky itself had decided to bear witness to the night ahead. Doug stood in his clinic's private office, staring at a half-finished glass of scotch. He had rehearsed the conversation a dozen times in his head, what to say, how much to reveal, how far to go, and offering himself to Joey in exchange for Vanessa's safety. But every version ended the same way, with Joey smiling that half smile, the one that never reached his eyes. Across town, Vanessa was dressing for what she told herself would be the final meeting. She'd chosen a deep navy suit, sharp enough to project control, but neutral enough not to invite questions. Inside her clutch, wrapped in a folded napkin, was a flash drive. It contained transaction histories, shell company structures, and copies of the falsified valuations, everything Joey had funneled through her business. It was her insurance policy, the one thing that might make the law pause before it swallowed her whole. The problem was deciding who to give it to. Randy was already at Joey's penthouse, leaning against the glass wall, watching the lights flicker in the rain-soaked streets below. He'd been running errands all day, collecting envelopes, dropping off gifts, meeting with people who smiled too wide and asked too few questions. The work felt almost comforting now, but the air tonight was different. Joey hadn't told him who was coming or why. That usually meant Joey wanted a private stage for whatever game he was about to play. When Doug finally arrived, he was ushered into the main room without ceremony. Joey was seated at the head of a long, low table, a half-empty bottle of wine beside him. Randy straightened, but didn't speak. Doug's gaze flickered toward him, part accusation, part resignation. Joey gestured toward the chair opposite. "You've been busy," Joey said, his tone conversational but weighted. "Asking questions. Looking for accommodations." Doug swallowed, choosing his words carefully. "I came here to talk about Vanessa. She's being set up to take the fall for something she doesn't fully understand. I can help you. Skills, information, whatever you need. Just keep her out of it." Joey leaned back, studying him. "You think you're in a position to negotiate?" His eyes slid toward Randy, who met his gaze with practiced neutrality. "I admire the loyalty, though." "To a point." Before Doug could respond, the elevator chimed. Vanessa stepped out, reins still glistening on her shoulders. She froze when she saw Doug, her expression flickering through surprise, suspicion, and something else, fear. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said slowly. "I could say the same," Doug replied. Joey stood, the movement smooth but sharp enough to reclaim the room. "Well, isn't this a family reunion? Saves me the trouble of arranging it." He poured a third glass of wine, setting it in front of Vanessa. "We have a problem. The kind that doesn't go away with time or charm. And I'm deciding who walks away from it." The tension was thick enough to taste. Doug realized with sudden clarity that Joey already knew about the flash drive. Maybe Randy had tipped him off. Maybe Joey had just anticipated every move they'd make. Vanessa placed her clutch on the table. "If I go down, you go down too," she said, her voice steady. "This isn't a threat, it's just the truth. You can protect me, or we can both burn." Joey's smile was faint, dangerous. "You think you're holding a loaded gun, Vanessa, but you're pointing it at the wrong man. I've been planning for this longer than you've been worried about it." Randy shifted slightly, his hand resting on the back of a chair. In that moment, Doug understood Randy wasn't just here to observe. He was the insurance policy, the enforcer, the witness to whatever Joey wanted etched into their memories. But then something unexpected happened. Randy spoke. "You could make this go away clean," he said to Joey. "Let them walk. Keep the files. Shift the heat somewhere else. You've done it before." It was the first hint of defiance Doug had ever seen from him. Vanessa noticed it too, her eyes narrowing in calculation. Joey studied Randy for a long moment. "You've been getting ideas again," he murmured. "Dangerous habit." The silence that followed was electric. In it, Doug saw a crack, small but real. Joey's control wasn't absolute tonight. If they moved together, if they acted now. Vanessa's hand inched toward her clutch. Doug leaned forward, his voice low. "If we walk out of here, this ends tonight. No more games." Joey laughed softly, shaking his head. "The only thing that ends tonight is the illusion that you have choices." What happened next unfolded in seconds, but would replay in each of their minds for years. Vanessa slid the flash drive across the table toward Joey, not surrender, but bait. Doug stood at the same moment, drawing Joey's focus just long enough for Randy to step in, close enough to speak in Joey's ear. No one else heard what Randy said. But Joey's expression shifted, first irritation, then calculation, and finally something colder, more measured. He picked up the flash drive, weighed it in his hand, and then tossed it back to Vanessa. "Get out," he said. "Both of you. And pray I don't change my mind." They didn't wait to be told twice. Doug and Vanessa left together, neither speaking until they were in the rain again. Back in the penthouse, Joey poured himself another glass of wine. "You've bought them a reprieve," he said to Randy without looking up. "Not a pardon." Randy only nodded. In Joey's world, a reprieve was more dangerous than a sentence. It meant the blade was still hanging, just waiting for the right moment to drop. And outside, the rain kept falling, washing the city clean in the way only storms can, leaving behind the things too heavy to be carried away.